Good morning and welcome to your Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 5th. And will please stand for the pledge and invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious and Heavenly Father, we are so thankful that you allow us to come together today to see another one of your beautiful days and to come together to work to make this county a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. We ask that you be with us today as we make these decisions. We humble our hearts and regulate our minds. Father, we ask you to be with those that put their lives on the line for us each and every day, whether they're military uniforms or first responders. We ask you to put your loving arms around them, protect them, let them go back to their homes when their duty is done. When our work is done here today, we ask you to take us back to our homes and find everything safe and sound. These are all blessed. We ask in your righteous name. Amen.
Amen.
Going to move into public comment. Is there anyone wishing to address the board this morning? You have 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to address the board? Yes, sir. Please come in and state your name. No need to give your address.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Gibbons. I live in the city of Tampa, and here to talk to you about, as always, this expansion of the interstate. Today, though, I'm talking about something else, which, in the spirit of giving, what this month represents, I'd like to talk to you about the Tampa Heights Community Garden. It's a wonderful place where citizens give back their time to this city and their community. In this garden, we have about 40 self-maintained plots where we practice sustainable, chemical-free farming. Within this garden, also, we have 4 large plots maintained by the local youth. 2 of those are part of what we call the entrepreneurial teenage garden, where we teach kids marketing and business skills. We also teach them physics, chemistry, and biology in the barn that we built that maintains an aquaponics system. And I'll be happy to show you guys that anytime. I've actually had a certification in aquaponic growing, along with my master's in sustainable transportation I'm working on right now. This is just one example, though, of the community erosion that we're going to see through the garden, through FDOT's expansion of this interstate. This garden actually lays within the footprint of what will be the southbound 275 onto eastbound I-4 interchange. If you notice, Mayor Buckhorn, at the time was City Council, along with 6 other members, blessed the garden as a place that was going to stand the test of time. And I hope that y'all will keep that word of those elected officials. I'm going through a few now. This is part of the garden here. This is inside the barn here. That's me. And a lot of y'all probably think I need a haircut, but I like it the way it is. Now, finally, I'd like to talk to you about this slide here. It was the best I could do, as the upload from FDOT was a little grainy. But this is what FDOT says they hear us saying and what they're going to do about it. And as I've been able to line up most of these without everything except for neighborhood preservation. So I'd ask you today to please consider what FDOT is doing to preserve our neighborhoods, because I don't see much of it in the city of Tampa. And this has been a problem that I have said before, is intergenerational. And it needs to stop. I thank you for your time. I wish you all happy holidays, and I appreciate everything you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Happy holidays to you also. Chris Villa.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chris Vella. I live at 924.
Sir, you have to give your address.
Okay, I'm just trying to play in order here. Okay, so there's something really disturbing in your agenda packet. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. I don't have a fever, so I'm not going to spread it. About 2018 legislation, priorities and recommendations and so forth. I think all of it, for the most part, is good, except one part, and that's trying to derive funding from toll lanes. Why on earth would an MPO who's pushing for Vision Zero principles, who is trying to actually hopefully reduce VMT in more pedestrian areas like our downtown, maybe even Temple Terrace, want to increase capacity on the interstate just to bleed those cars on the road? Why would we want that type of mentality and then say okay, to follow up with that, let's see if we can derive any type of transit money from tolls. The way how this works, folks, is that there is a transit authority, for example, over here would be Florida Turnpike Enterprises. They would have to make those decisions. Then that would have to go over to TBARTA. So what that means is that you have less opportunity to actually have a public buy-in, a local public buy-in. It just doesn't make any sense why we would be even talking about deriving any money from the toll lanes, because that's still being determined in my neighborhood. And that's what really frustrates me. It also really frustrates me the fact that we want to do this Vision Zero thing. I think it's a great program. It worked extremely well in other cities. But we just can't keep on adding more cars to the interstate system and having those go into upcoming neighborhoods like Tampa Heights or Ybor City, which actually has it's actually the most walkable district in Tampa. And people walk to from the streetcar. So let's see if we can just remove that little tidbit line. Again, if it's in your agenda packet, it's under the 2018 legislative recommendations. And I just want to remind you, there was a news report recently that said that the I-95 express lanes has 8 times the amount of fatalities compared to other Florida roads. 8 times. So again, like, why do you want to derive any money from a toll lane system? And we know that currently, right now, I-4 is still the most dangerous road. So we have to look at ways to get these cars off the road, but also have choices for people to get to places. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good holiday.
Sir, I'm going to have Ms. Beth Alden address your concerns. Mr. Villa.
Good morning, and thank you for coming this morning. The recommendation of the MPO Policy Committee was about finding new funding sources for regionally significant transit facilities. And the concern was that longer distance express bus service that crosses county boundaries is an expensive type of service. And because we're challenged with the amount of funding that we have available for bus service, we wouldn't want the creation of new regional transit services to come at the expense of our local bus routes, which are so sorely needed. And so the policy committee's recommendation was, let's work together to find some new funding streams to support regional transit. We heard from the director of the Miami-Dade TPO that toll revenue set-asides is something that they have used there. So it's identified as one option, but there are other options to look at, such as inclusion as part of the state's strategic intermodal system, so that those bus services would qualify for those types of funds. Or there's actually a bill that is being circulated right now that would provide a new matching grant program through TBARDA. So, and I'm sure that there are other options as well, but I think the committee's point was we need new funding if we're going to implement regional transit.
I have a quick question. Has the board or the BOCC, for the matter, ever considered having an additional tax added to Uber and Lyft rides as a source of revenue? It's kind of like what Sacramento's doing right now.
Says the BOCC done that?
I don't know if it would be, you might have to work, sir, with the BOCC, because it would be
Our
just like
BOCC?
how, yes, sir, yeah, you sit on here.
You have a bad cold, don't you?
Right. Was there any discussion about that, though, as an additional source of revenue?
No.
Okay, because that's something that I think that would definitely be a positive I'd like to see, because right now, currently, if anybody doesn't know, there is an impact fee charge to an Uber or Lyft driver that goes to the airport. All I'm asking just for today is it's okay to look for other funding opportunities. It's great. Like the bullet points you have for your recommendations in 2018 it's great. It's on point. We know, like, unfortunately, with Trump's performance bonding tax thing that he's running is going to destroy a lot of partnerships out there. But so we have to keep on looking. All I'm asking is that please just remove the toll set aside subsidies.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else wants to address the board this morning? Okay, thank you very much. Committee reports, online comments. Ms. Torres, good morning.
Good morning. Gina Torres, MPO staff. For your consent items today, the Citizens Technical Bicycle Pedestrian and Policy Committees approved the 2018 calendar and the Brandon Corridor and Center study. There were comments about that study endorsing the transit improvements, not supporting the reversible lane on Bloomingdale, adding that the attention is needed for Lithia Pinecrest and north-south movements. And there was questions on how development could be incentivized to implement the recommendations for mixed-use centers. The other consent item was proposed by the policy committee and have several recommendations for the legislative policy positions. The TIP amendment on your agenda for roll call was supported by the committees. BPAC members emphasized the importance of complete streets and noted the imbalance of funding for capacity projects over safety. The committees approved the Vision Zero action plan that's going to be presented to you today. Other presentations made to the committees last month, the regional scenario planning survey, the Expressway Authority's connected vehicle project, the status of planning for resiliency to severe weather. The school transportation working group will be giving an update today on as a status report, so I don't need to share anything from their meeting here. The Florida MPO Advisory Council met and agreed to create a new working group to improve MPO training opportunities, and they were also briefed on DOT major projects to be funded by 2045, next steps for Sun Trail, state MPO coordination and setting performance targets, and Florida State, the study of transit applications for autonomous vehicles. Lastly, at the T-Bar to MPO directors meeting, several items were discussed for the upcoming Chairs Coordinating Committee meeting on December 1st. An update of the regional priority projects reflecting the TMA and other changes, measures of effectiveness report for the regional public participation program, regional short-term targets for crash reduction, a minor administrative update of the interlocal agreement creating the CCC, and a special meeting on the regional planning best practices study was also held. The consultant is looking at existing organizational relationships and describing options in the future, noting what might or might not require law changes. So that was your committee reports, and I'll move on to the online comments from the public. There were no Facebook comments for today's meeting, although we did have a Facebook comment on the Zero page asking about the bicycle safety action plan and what's been accomplished on that study that was done several years ago. We'll be following up on that. There was an email from Mauricio Rosas. It was to Mayor Buckhorn, but it included most of you and others. And it was just about hit-and-run crashes and the speeding that was happening in Seminole Heights on Henry and Ola. He was hit, actually, and got a broken leg. We had an email from Robert Sawalish, and he was concerned about the intersection of Bruce B. Downs and the entrance to the VA hospital, and he was circulating a petition. They're asking for streetlights, crosswalks, signals, and turn lanes. And then we had 7 emails from Dale Tyndall regarding the Howard Franklin Bridge congestion and through downtown and beyond. So those, and of course you've got all their comments in your packet. That's a summary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Move to consent agenda. There are 4 items on the consent agenda. What's your pleasure? There's a motion by Commissioner Murray, second by Commissioner Kemp to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We're now on the roll call vote for the TIP amendments from West Hillsborough Avenue Complete Street Project and I-75 and State Road 60 on ramp improvements. Any discussion on that? What's your pleasure?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Murray, second by Councilman Cohen to approve the TIP amendments. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Anderson?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Mechanic?
Yes.
Jurado?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Capano?
Yes.
Lott? Miller?
Yes.
Viera?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Wagoner?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Stewart?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
By your vote, the motion is adopted. Action items, elections of officers. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is the portion of the agenda where you're going to choose your officers and committee members for the following year. First is the position of chair. I'm going to open the floor for nominations. Seconds are not required for nominations. I'll continue to ask for nominations until no more are received, and then I'll call for a vote on each nomination in the order that they were made. At this time, I'd ask for nominations for the office of chair of the MPO Governing Board.
Nominate Commissioner Miller. He was a councilman at one
I
time.
was a councilman.
Commissioner Miller is nominated. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, Commissioner Miller is chair. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Next is the office of vice chair of the MPO Governing Board. Are there any nominations?
Move for Councilman Cohen.
Councilman Cohen is nominated. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, Councilman Cohen is vice chair. Congratulations. Next, board members, you need to appoint 5 members that are regular members of your policy committee and 2 alternates. I believe, Beth, you might need to name the current members. I know some of them, but we have alternates show up sometimes. And I know we lost Mr. Bowers also.
So our current members of the policy committee are Councilman Cohen, Commissioner Merman, Commissioner Kemp, Councilman Maniscalco, and we have 2 alternate members, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Wagner. And Mr. Bowers was a member and is no longer on our board.
So we would need, if the sitting members are okay remaining, that's fine, but we'd still need 1 more member for the regular appointee for the policy committee.
Mr. Bowers is a regular member.
And we really do need somebody, because
Who are the alternates?
So our alternates are Mr. Wagner and Mr. Anderson.
Wagner, would you like to move up to be on the board instead of being an alternate?
Yeah. One time he came, he did a really good job. And I think it's an excellent idea that Mr. Wagner, and I'll nominate him for the boss.
One time.
Oh, whisper now, Mr. Wagner. Are you accepting that position, Mr. Wagner?
Yes, sir. May I have another, please?
So, Mr.
Okay,
Wagner, now we need
Mr. Wagner, and we would need then an alternate to replace Mr. Wagner.
Need an alternate for Mr. Wagner. Anyone volunteering to be an alternate? Ms. Stewart, you have the look on your face.
What look is that? Because I went to one policy meeting too.
Oh, okay,
Very
then she's
helpful having you there.
nominated. Okay, she's in.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have it. Anything else?
Yes, sir. We have 3 members plus 2 alternates for the TMA leadership group.
I definitely
yeah, and I
should
want
stay
to
on.
stay on that too.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
So we
Okay.
have 3.
And our 2 alternates are Mr. Lopano and Mr. Anderson. Okay, great.
Remain?
They're
Okay.
not here, so they stay.
Then you have 4 individual appointments. You have the chair of the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board, which I believe is you, Mr. Cohen.
And I would really love for someone to take that over. I've done it for about 5 or 6 years, and it's a wonderful assignment. It's only 4 or 5 times a year. So,
What is that again? Which one?
the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board.
Anyone volunteering to serve on that board?
It's to serve as chair.
Oh, it's chair.
I mean, but it's really very interesting.
It does have to be an elected official under state law.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Vieira.
I was gonna say, I'll be honored to do it. All right.
You will enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Next, you have your chair of the Livable Roadways Committee.
Who was that before?
Mr. Green is currently our chair.
And Mr. Green, you're going to stay chair?
Well, it was a struggle this year with my class teaching schedule, but I'll do the best I can for next year.
Tell Dr. Genschaft we need you.
And 2 more, sir. You have your representative for the MPO Advisory Committee.
The Florida,
I'm
MPO Advisory Council.
Council, sorry.
And currently that's Mr. Anderson.
Okay. Mr. Anderson's not here, so he still has it.
And then finally, sir, you have your School Transportation Working Group member.
That's Ms. Stewart. And Ms. Stewart's still going to do that, right? Thank you very much.
Yeah, one more year.
All right, that's it, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for your support and volunteering. If you weren't volunteer drafted, to serve with those bodies, okay. Vision Zero Action Plan and Pledge Drawing, Ms. Torres.
Thank you. I could talk about this for an hour, but I promised I wouldn't. I have about 5 minutes that I want to share with you the results of the development of our action plan, and really thank this board for agreeing to take on the role of putting this together. And then the policy committee set aside 4 of their meetings last year to help develop this plan, and it really got things going. We were able to get support from the other jurisdictions at the beginning of this, saying, this sounds like, go for it, this sounds like a great plan. And we're able to then start developing the action plan with a really nice range of people and groups. And it's gonna take an entire community, and even more than you see here on this slide, to implement the strategies and get the word out and get this movement going that we are killing and hurting too many people on our roadways. We've done a lot, and over this last year, we had, if you haven't seen it, and we'd love for people to pass this along, but we had a video that we highlighted the victims, four local families that were either people had passed away or it was their family members that told their story. And that is an essential part of Vision Zero, is getting those stories out, because then we realize that the folks out here getting hurt are loved ones and family members. Anyway, we painted a bike lane over the bridge in Temple Terrace over the river. We marched for a recognition for the girl who had died, Alexis Miranda, when she was heading to school. So we've kind of done quite a few things. We have a bunch of maps that highlight the highest crash corridors, whether it was because it was an aggressive driving, or we highlighted the corridors that were in dark conditions. We have a lot of great data in our Facebook page. So we've done a lot over this last year. We have a lot left to do. And there's 4 action tracks. The one message, many voices, was getting that word out and forging relationships with these families and doing, a lot of outreach. We did create a number of these stickers. Well, they were actually, you can remove them, so they're decals. And I have to tell you, the one that I Break for Chiefs that we had handed out when we did that walk that's Chamberlain High School, I saw one on the highway on 275, and I was like, oh my gosh, our word is getting out there. I did take a picture of it, but it was like congestion was happening at the time, so there's no crashes happened because of my taking a picture. I was so excited. But we are going to, we have a number of people that are interested in being on our Speakers Bureau to get this word out. As soon as you all are approving this plan, and I can take the word draft off of it, we can get this pushed out to our community and our churches and our clubs and groups. I'll be holding a Safe Streets Summit, a regional Safe Streets Summit this February on the 27th, and that's the first time we've done that. So there's a lot of great things going on this particular action track. For Consistent and Fair, that's the law enforcement group, we're going to be working through the Community Traffic Safety Team, which is got law enforcement's already present at these meetings, and we're going to use them, bounce off ideas on how to better use our data to do better enforcement. If an issue is going through stop signs in a neighborhood, well, let's use the enforcement for those reasons. And under this action track, we're going to be adopting the MPO. We've set aside funds this year to have 2 Vision Zero corridors. And we're going to adopt those corridors, and we're going to go out there, show people, talk to them about people that have gotten hurt, their neighbors who have been hurt or killed on this road. Speak to the businesses, talk to them about slowing down. Maybe doing a pop-up treatment where there's a need for a crosswalk, and we'll just have law enforcement out there. We just really want to get this word out about Vision Zero. So there's a lot going on in this, and the action track itself has a much more in-depth list of strategies. These are the things we're going to be doing over this next year, but the plan itself has a lot more detail. The Paint Saves Lives. These are pop-up treatments. It doesn't necessarily have to be paint. This county is already using these leading pedestrian intervals. It's changing signal timing to give the pedestrian the green before anyone else moves, just for a few seconds. We need to start seeing more of these, and we're going to be encouraging the jurisdictions to do this. DOT is sponsoring a art contest to wrap the traffic boxes, and they can put messages on those to tell people safely how to cross the road there. So there's a lot of great things going on. Maybe we can do some more painted intersections that don't get pressure washed off next time. And lastly, the future is not like the past. This action track looked at manuals and our procedures and our operating procedures that could be tweaked or changed in the vein of Vision Zero, and we can do a better job in all of our professions if we have the ability to move some of these ideas forward. So maybe there's some changes to the land development code. When we replace lights, let's use LED lights. That makes a huge difference. So these are some of the things that we are focusing on for the next year in this particular action track. So as I was presenting this over this past forever, it feels like, but for this last year, I was asking people to, get on the Facebook page, share this message at home with your families. Watch that video. It's very moving. We just want everyone to start talking about the need to be more mindful on our roadways, that we are killing too many people and we are hurting people, and we need to slow down and put our phones down and pay attention. And this goes on both sides of the wheel. So what I'm asking you all is to approve the action plan so I can take that word draft off there and really get this thing out there. So that's kind of my first request. And I was going to ask you to go through the pledge, but I'm not going to do it because you only have a small little screen here. But at the end, one of the things that we all did was we were able to get a really discounted ad in the yearbook for the Bucks, and it came with 2 tickets and a parking pass. So anyone who filled out our Vision Zero pledge, name is in my grandson's helmet, and we're going to pull out who gets the tickets to the Bucks game. But that's after discussion here about the approval of the plan. So do you have any questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
I'd like to move approval.
Second.
And I guess I don't have questions about the plan so much. Why don't we just vote on the plan? I have some suggestions about Division Zero
Right.
and some areas of expansion.
Now, wait a minute, do you want to, you say you have some suggestions?
Yeah, I have some things I'd like to ask about Vision Zero and adding to it. So we could just.
Well, no, if we're going to approve it, you need to, if they're going to be added, we need to do it now.
Well, I'd like to see that we include, or
Commissioner Kemp, get the mic. The mic.
no. I'd like to see that we start to be cognizant of our fatality rate here in Hillsborough County. I get emails in my private email all the time that I'm on this listserv, when I get notified every time someone dies in Hillsborough County in a crash. As we know, we have the second highest fatality rate in the nation. It's a continual issue. We keep staying there. And, you know, as my year here on the Hillsborough County MPO, I've heard discussion of it, but I've never heard, and we've talked about Vision Zero, but I would like to have quarterly updates on how we're doing on what those crashes are, pedestrian, car. I understand that there's a high motorcycle crash. There might be something that bicycles. And so I'd like to have quarterly reports made to this board. They could be short, but that we're aware, cognizant, and that we see whether we're doing better or worse or what we have to do. The other thing is twice a year, and I don't know if this falls under Vision Zero, but I think that we have to have more understanding of vehicle miles traveled, and I can't imagine any place else other than the MPO to have this discussion, or at least this awareness of what we have. I think very few people know that vehicle miles traveled in this nation increased from the 1930s in a direct mountain-like curve right up to 2003 in most communities, and 2007 here in Hillsborough County, and then it leveled off, totally plateaued for about 7 years, and now it's rising again. But vehicle miles per capita is also dropping, and I think it's really important for us to understand how and what our roads are being used for here. So I'd like to see us start to understand and hear more about vehicle miles traveled and how that's impacting our transportation. And I think that has a lot to do, with how we look at Vision Zero. Also, the other area that I've asked about, we had a presentation on bus stops at the HART meeting last month that I've been interested in for a while. And some things that were explained to me is that there's a siloed type of work about this, which is FDOT takes no, they do not get involved, they do not do eminent domain, they do not build in bus stops to the streets. Our land development code apparently doesn't make for this either. So they were explaining that when they don't have right-of-way, they haven't been able to put in stops, they haven't been able to engineer that in a way that is acceptable. In some places where they have no ability to put in a stop, they put in a skinny stop. So I was, right after the presentation, I was driving on Hillsborough Avenue right at the Walmart at 15th and Hillsborough, and I noticed that at that spot they had a skinny stop sitting over the sidewalk, which we have so often here. And I was like, why do we have a skinny stop here on Hillsborough Avenue with this massive right-of-way, but also at a new Walmart that has a parking lot that even on Black Friday was 1/3 empty, with at least 200 empty spaces in it. It seems to me we have to have coordination in some way between our land development code, our MPO, our FDOT, and you know, we have to do something about how this is siloed and nobody's dealing with it and there's no coordinated way to deal with it. Again, to me, that strikes me as a Vision Zero type of initiative, along with the other issue that we have is mid-street crossings, which I understand we need more and more, but we have serious problems with that because, again, there's like these jurisdictional issues both with the county, the city, our land development codes, FDOT, to the point that we're ending up with no opportunity in pedestrian, in places that pedestrians very much need, crosswalks, and, you know, we could protect lives by doing it, but we're not doing it because of land development issues. We never built that in the first place because of FDOT, lack of coordination, whatever. So I'm not sure if we need to include this in the plan to address it, what you would suggest about this, but I think that these are all issues that are important.
Commissioner Kemp, everything you said was in line with Vision Zero. I think it belongs in there. It is in there in one way or another already. The things you talked about, the performance measures, I love the idea of coming back and talking about that. We have to do that. There's little round parts of the plan that show those are our performance measures. We're going to make sure that we're tracking how we're doing on lots of different things. And the VMT, the land development, everything you said falls into this. And we'll move forward with it. And I loved your comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Merman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gina, I just want to thank you for all your work and dedication to Vision Zero. It has moved us mountains ahead in our efforts. And I know even with the county staff, I continually ask them, and they are incorporating, you know, these concepts into every single major road improvement, right? John and Lucy are back there, and they're shaking their heads. But no, they are, and they've taken it very seriously. So, and I know the city is probably doing the same thing. So, because there isn't a day I don't see a new bike lane popping up in the city.
Hear about it.
Yes, I know, we do hear about, but no, I do thank you very, very much. And it is going to save lives in the long run. We may not see it tomorrow, but we will see improvements very much as we go along. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Councilman Corn, you recognize.
Thank you very much. I just want to add, one of the things that has really come up lately as a repeated theme, and it particularly has come up when I have been visiting at some of the schools, is the issue of texting while driving. And it's really not just texting while driving, it's also people texting while they're walking along and crossing the street. And, you know, it's people that are doing all kinds of things and being distracted by texting. But there seems to be a view that it's not going to be possible to get a texting while driving ban through the legislature. I'm not sure why that is, but I've been told that consistently. And I think that if that's the case, we have got to do a much better job of using this bully pulpit and this program to remind people about this issue. This doesn't cost anything. It's not something that is going to require any resources. It just requires reminding people to discipline themselves not to text until they've stopped the car. And it's something everybody can do, and I really think that it may not be an official part of the program, but it's something that we need to just keep harping on it with people constantly, because I know everyone sees it. I see it everywhere. Every time I'm at an intersection where the light turns green and the car in front of me doesn't move, it's because the person is engrossed in some sort of other activity.
I think that's on your legislative letter today, and it's also something like I know.
It is, but I mention it
neighborhood.
because when we discussed it at the policy committee, we sort of recognized that wasn't going to go anywhere. So we
All of the 4 families that talked, all of those victims on that video talked about that and how that was impacted in their crash. So we all know it's huge, and it's part of Vision Zero is this message. And it's messaging, and we want our sponsors to be more involved in helping us and getting more sponsors. So.
Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gina, I just had a question about the coalition page. Why aren't our universities and community colleges identified as partner members, or?
Well, I mean, we'll add more and more people and on there, and because you were involved, that probably would make it just fine enough to put USF on there too. We'd like to have a person, like I'm gonna go to Hart, I'm presenting to them in January, and I'm gonna add their logo at that time, because I kind of officially spoke to them, and they're gonna sign a resolution. But anyone who wants to sign on to be part of this, we'll add logos to, and we'll add them and ask them for assistance in moving some of these strategies forward. Most of it doesn't cost anything. It's setting up a march. It's, setting up a meeting.
Well, I just wanted to know also, I mean, are you the sort of the prime marketer of this program?
Actually,
or?
that's a good point. I just want you to know that we had no intention of the MPO forever housing this. This should become in the future a nonprofit or a board that takes this thing on and moves it forward. But for the time being, I don't plan on going anywhere for a while, although I do have a grandson and I'm starting to want to spend more time with him. But I am the person, so you can contact me and I'll put more information on there.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions or discussion? I think the motion was made by Commissioner Kemp, and I think Commissioner, you have a question?
No, I second.
You second it, by Ms. Stewart. Any further discussion, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, let them be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise.
So this
Motion's
is-
adopted.
Sorry, this is for the Monday night football game on the 18th. This is the people that have put their names in for the pledge, so we need to pull out their names. I know the butts aren't in that grade, but they are.
You say, yes, they are.
You're just not winning.
Pull out.
That's the objective of the game, to win.
So, these are the folks
They're just not winning.
Like losing.
I want to get, where do you get that helmet?
I know, I ordered it.
Margaret Kubelines.
Okay, great, and we'll just pick an extra one, you don't have to read it out, just in case he doesn't respond.
She.
Oh, Margaret. Oh, Margaret. Okay, thank you. And our
Les
runner-up?
Miller. No, I'm just kidding. Michelle Pleasant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, status reports. School Transportation Working Group updates with jurisdictions. First is Working Group Highlights 2017. Lisa Silva. Good morning.
All right, Lisa Silva, MPO staff, and I'm your liaison for the School Transportation Working Group. I want to point out that we're a working group. We are not a committee. I think also have to disclose I am a passionate mother on this topic. I'm like Gina, I could talk for hours, but I won't. I came to you in November to give you the annual update and ask that you approve us to work on this and continue our work for another year, and highlight the successes and some of the outstanding challenges that we still have, which would warrant us to continue to come to the table and address things. But then you guys made a motion to table this and come back when we had a little more time. So since I'm not the expert on all things school transportation or the school district in particular, I have brought experts with me to highlight those topics. So instead of getting a short snippet of just what Lisa Silva knows about the topic, you actually get to speak to the actual folks. So oddly, we had a high school student intern pointed out that we could coordinate better on school and transportation, and you all listened and agreed with him, so we revised our bylaws and added a school board member to the MPO back in February of 2015. Then we got rolling with the working group. We said, oh, there are a lot of issues. And believe me, I have learned a lot. So I feel like I've gotten an entire other education beyond my degree this last couple of years, but we've learned a lot, and what the group did was then get our hands around all these big Herculean topics that hadn't been addressed specifically regarding school and transportation. The school district does have a bi-monthly school coordination meeting that I started attending before this group got formed, but they have to address coordinations with libraries, real estate, stormwater ponds, co-locating parks, and their meetings were becoming very voluminous and long and arduous, so they were very grateful when we carved out school transportation and put it into this working group so that we could get it refined. But always the intention was to take the working group and institutionalize it into a school district committee. We studied the Pinellas County STEPS program. that they have that's highly successful, and we're been working to model ourselves after that and customize it for Hillsborough County. So we began in April 2016 working on the big picture issues. Then in 2017, we took MPO planning dollars and started working on performing the study. So we've been doing a data-driven approach to study all of the schools, and you're going to hear some details about that in a minute. And then we continued helping the school district address those bigger picture issues like the non-funded busing removal, the bell times, and some other things I'll highlight in just a second. So, looking ahead, in 2018, we still have a couple of big topics that we'd like to take on, and then again, hand over the reins to the school district and move it 2 blocks down the street, and then I can go work on some other things and then just support them with their efforts. So we will continue planning support, and we'll continue to participate as needed in their version of whatever this committee becomes. Go on. Okay. We kicked off last year with a big survey. We sent a survey out to all of the parents and guardians throughout the school district, got a really great response with a short period of time that helped us and inform our school safety study. It also helped us identify some issues. One of my little pet peeves is that the schools had different policies for how they addressed whether the students could bike or walk to school within that short distance around the schools. And so now I can say, yay, it's all uniform throughout the district, and they are allowed for the parent to decide how they get to and from to school in the parent responsibility area. Yes, it is defined by state law, which you'll hear a little bit more about, and a little bit from the school district. So we were honored. Ms. Stewart was invited to Washington to speak on a panel by the Bellwether Education Partners. They identified us as one of the unique groups that looks at this issue on a regional basis and wanted to study this, and they have a report to help encourage other areas to do the same. Besides the monthly bigger picture meetings, we have what I've been just calling the technical data meetings, because that's where I get all the public works staff and the district bus routing people in a room, and we deal with the more detailed and specific issues. So this has helped us share lots of information across jurisdictions. It saved a lot of information. When you just look at a picture, we've got like tons of maps. When you see things, it helps us identify the issues and go to address them. The school district has one GIS person that's like a consultant that they contract. So just having all of our resources available to them has made a huge difference in showing that. We worked with our local jurisdictions. Plant City and Temple Terrace have really enjoyed having us as an extension of staff to help with seeing these and helping them address things that they've had to do. Luckily, the Department of Transportation had safety dollars and said they could do 2 school-related road safety audits for us. So they went in around our 2 highest impacted schools. So we used the data that we'd been developing to pick the 2 schools. And then it also helped us inform another study that we're working on with the with the Department of Transportation. The state, like some of the legislative things you're dealing with now, in previous years, they changed the state law regarding school zones. So the Department of Transportation used all that information and inventorying that we've been pulling together to help them move forward, and then they are helping us getting all the school zones up to the same throughout all of the counties. So that's been briefed to the school road. This is that project. One of our highest impacted schools, which was unfortunately where the student was killed, is near Chamberlain. We heard that they were doing a West Bush Boulevard vision study and doing resurfacing along Bush Boulevard. So we said, well, let's not put a road safety audit in and around there, because we can work with the department on this corridor and hopefully address all our safety concerns around that school within this effort. So not only me, but school staff and principals have been going to their planning advisory groups, and we really appreciate the department having us involved and listening to us throughout the way. Another big topic that school transportation addressed, which is going to help everything next year, is the revised bell times. So 12,000 students were late every day. They did a huge outreach and heard from the parents. The magnet times are going to start an hour later approximately. High school's going to start a little later. This is all going to hopefully help our congestion on the roadways for all those working individuals. We've been using the data we've developed to inform our Safe Routes to School applications. And the MPO heard about the Transportation and Civil Engineering program through our certification process. So we sent the STEM, the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math coordinator to their training last summer, which led to a grant for the school district. So we're like, yay, those things are helping. We've been doing a lot of outreach as well through the Parent University Choice Expos. So we get that not everything is going to be an engineering solution. Not everything is going to be solved by this. We're going to have those texting high schoolers and texting middle schoolers. So education is another big important component. So we have spent some time on that. I just wanted to highlight this. When we kicked off Vision Zero, and then I started the school transportation working group efforts, there was the high school video contest. One of them talked about put it down while you're biking around, which was text related, and one was the crosswalk one. They're 30 seconds, low cost. They won awards. You gave them an award, or a recognition here. Well, this summer we found out that they won a contest. So it's just another little fun thing. Of course, Vision Zero, we want 0 students impacted by our fatalities and severe crashes. So we have partnered all along the way with Vision Zero efforts. One in particular that they identified as a thing that the school board could take on is their Paint Saves Lives category, where they could do intersections in and around schools. And again, we looked at which schools are most in need through our data project that you're going to hear about next. One of our members is American Planning Association executive team member, and she's looking to get us a grant so that we can help the school board paint one. That's one of our 2018 projects too. We want to thank the Department of Transportation. Again, I'm all about you got to get the word out. We had 7,500 potential new walkers and bikers at the beginning of this past year, so I said we need to remind them how to safely get to and from school. And the Department of Transportation sponsored the public service announcement that Superintendent Aiken did. I won't make you sit through it like I did for the Great American Teach-In. The Walking School Bus Program at Roosevelt received an outstanding contribution award from the Planning Commission. They were a parent-led grassroots effort that's been really, they've had over half the school walk on the first day of school this year, which was significantly higher than in the past. This is one of the topics that we still have yet to tackle, that we've begun work with the Sheriff's Department. We find that in our county, we only have crossing guards at elementary schools, yet our data that we've been refining and working on this past year identifies middle school and high schoolers. High schools have the higher crash history. We had a guest speaker from City of Largo, and they have theirs designed more specifically at their high crash intersections, which included a charter school. We would like to explore a more data-driven approach to that, if that works with the Sheriff's Department. We know from our Vision Zero efforts that they do have a data-driven approach to crime and traffic safety. We're hoping maybe that we can take what they know in that division and help map it on the other with our information. The project you're going to hear about next has our final top 10 that we're going out for field reviews. I'm going to present the school safety study and our efforts to the school board in the first quarter of next year. We do still have 12,000 elementary students that have not been removed from the non-funded busing. That won't be dealt with on the immediate horizon, but we want to assist the school district on how to do that going forward. They like the idea of using our school safety study data to attack the ones that are lowest on the list and maybe do those that have less improvements needed to improve safety getting to and from school, and then just do that in waves instead of all at once like they handled with the middle school and high schoolers. I still continue to follow the school-related legislative issues, and again, knock me out of a job as the liaison and just have me be a participant and support the group and turn it over to the school district for what's next. Next, we're going to hear about the MPO school safety study from our consultant, Chris Keller. And then following that, the local jurisdictions will tell you about some of the school-related projects that they've been sharing with our groups that they're handling locally. And then we'll hear from the school district chief operating officer.
Before you leave, are there any questions? Commissioner Wright, you
Highlights?
recognize.
Okay.
When this working group transitions to a committee within the school district, is the makeup going to be the same?
No, predictably not.
You know,
They're forming that now, and Chris Farkas will tell you more about that when he gets up to present. Yeah, he's got security and safety. Yeah. He'll involve the jurisdictions as needed. But again, I'll let you talk to the source. Next.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Keller. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Chris Keller. As Lisa mentioned, I'm consultant to the MPO working on the school safety study. So today I just want to give you guys an overview of what we've been doing so far, what the study actually is, and as Lisa mentioned, we've identified 10 school areas for further review and overview of that process. It's a pretty heavy technical process. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but if you have any questions, more than happy to address any of them. So what is the school safety study? It's an effort to improve safety for all students of Hillsborough County. Our task on this was to look countywide, identify and prioritize what we're calling school areas. I'll define that a little bit better in a little bit. And then to go out and conduct safety reviews, to look for improvements, and really make the area around those schools safer, which is sort of the ultimate goal, is to get improvements programmed and underway to make it safer, more comfortable, easier for students to get to and from school. So in identifying the locations, we really wanted to take a data-driven approach. In the past, we've often just sort of limited to looking at crashes. Sometimes we'll incorporate, okay, well, how many students are in an area? But through the efforts of the School Transportation Working Group, they've amassed a giant amount of data, which has been great for us because we've been able to tap into that and use that to better inform our process. So the first thing that we did through ours, and there's reasons for this based off the number of schools and the attendance boundaries and the size and the distance between the schools, was to group all the schools within Hillsborough County into 4 categories. We call them school types. So all elementary schools, your sort of traditional elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and then you had another school category, which were your sort of magnet-only schools and your charter schools. And the reason that we put those into different categories, they don't have your typical attendance boundary, defined boundary of where they're pulling students from as the other schools do. So we treated them a little differently, but looked at them the same way as all the other schools. Next, we identified what we called our school evaluation areas. So we started off with taking a 2-mile walking distance from the school. So using GIS, we're able to go, if we were to walk from here, 2 miles. We overlaid that with the attendance boundary because we recognize that oftentimes 2 miles is further than where the boundary of the school is. So we wanted to sort of overlay that, and we were able to define what we called our school evaluation area, and that's the area that we went through and we looked at the data within that area for each school. In addition to the 2-mile one, we also wanted to look at, as you move closer to school, do those same statistics sort of ring true? Are the crashes more on the edge, further away from the school, or are they closer to school? So we created 1 mile and half-mile walking boundaries in school evaluation areas as well. So once we had our areas defined, we were able to attribute data to them. So the things that we looked at were total pedestrian and bicycle crashes. Is there an overall safety issue or concern within the area? So we wanted to look at a total number. Then we broke that down into a subset of looking at school-related pedestrian and bicycle crashes. So crashes that occurred where the pedestrian or bicyclist was of a school age. They occurred on days that school was in session during your typical arrival and dismissal times. So we were able to filter down those and identify where those locations are there hotspots? What school areas have more of those type of crashes as well? Does that also relate to the total crashes? I mean, is an area that has a bunch of total crashes also have a high number of school crashes, or is there a disproportion, the ratio different? We also had student data, so we were able to identify how many students live within each area. So, how many potential students are there that could walk to and from school within each area. So and we call those our Screen 1 data inputs, and I'll describe that a little bit here. And then we also had our Screen 2 inputs, which we refer to as our contributing factors. So we looked at things like major road intersections, so intersections with arterial roads, collector roads, potential points of conflict is sort of how we define those. Socioeconomic data, such as the percentage of students within the area that qualify for free or reduced lunch. Is the area within one of the MPO's identified communities of concerns? Reason for this are these areas that may have obstacles and challenges related to transportation and mobility. So we wanted to recognize that maybe this area may have additional challenges, and we can look at it a little differently. Lisa mentioned that there was a survey, the Getting to School survey. We looked at the results from that and added those in. The number of students that were impacted by non-funded transportation services. One of the late add-ins was, is it a traditional school? And this kind of was captured a little bit in the school types, but does it have a defined boundary, yes or no? And then we also did a review at the end. Has that school, is there a current study going on at the school, or is it recently looked at? We don't want to duplicate efforts as we're moving forward. So, like I said, we broke it up into 2 different screening processes. Screen 1, we looked at school-related transportation, or school-related pedestrian and bicycle crashes, total crashes, number percentage of students within each area, and then a rate of school-related crashes to area students. We went through a whole process where we ranked by each school type, and within distance, we applied different weighting criteria to the data itself, and then to the different sort of areas, so the 2-mile area, 1-mile area, and half-mile area. So if a crash occurred closer to the school, it got weighted a little higher than a crash that occurred further away from the school. And then we summed all that up and came up with a composite ranking score for Screen 1. And by doing that, we were able to take a list of 200 plus schools and take it to a more manageable list of about 40 schools and developed a short list. We then took that short list of schools and applied a similar type of weighting and ranking system on the Screen 2 attributes that I discussed earlier. And then we were able to take that, come up with a Screen 2 score, and basically then merge the 2 scores back together to come up with our prioritized list to identify 10 locations for additional review. And so, like I said, here's sort of our top 20 that we came up with. I'll stop at the top 10 in a minute, but you know, some of them we knew. There was recent RSAs done by DOT District 7, so we took those off the list. We also looked spatially. Does it make sense? Are these schools close enough to sort of group as one area to look at? We identified in our top 20 that there were some that the Farrell, Young, and Middleton schools were all relatively close to each other, all within a half mile, that those should probably make sense to look at as one school area. So we did that, and we came up with our list of 10. So what's next? Currently, we're working on conducting the multimodal safety reviews. We took this data that we used to screen it, the additional data that we had on the schools. So we've looked at things like school zones, crossing guards, pulled crash reports, went into, for the top 10 schools, dove in a little deeper. We're currently in the process of identifying potential improvements at those school locations, and then the next steps would be additional coordination and making sure those recommendations get implemented as projects. So with that, take any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Keller? Any questions?
That was a lot.
Seeing none, thank you, sir. Next, we have Ms. Garces from Hillsborough County, Mr. Martinez from City of Tampa.
Please tell the MPO staff while he's getting that loaded. The City of Tampa apologizes. They had a conflict today. They have an annual special event today, but they did send their PowerPoint slides, and they're in your folder of their school-related things, and they apologize. Plant City also wishes they could be here, but they have been working with our group, as is City of Temple Terrace.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Lucia Garces. I'm Chief of Development and Infrastructure for Hillsborough County, and we just wanted to share a couple of things that we're doing that we believe are really tracking well with the Vision Zero as well as the school safety initiatives. What you're getting is a presentation that is hot off the press. John and I debated about how to go about this, and at first it was going to be a lot of numbers and investments and such. And then we said, no, that's not really what we want to talk to this group about. What we'd really like to talk to you about are how it is that the information that is being compiled by the MPO, whether it's Vision Zero or whether it's the work of the school safety group, is really starting to filter in and is providing very useful insights to us because it is work that we can't do. So we'd like to talk to you about how that gets input, how that gets machinated, and what that looks like as it comes out. I think before we start, what I'd like to say is that the Board of County Commissioners in Hillsborough County has been committed to safety. If you track back as far as 2010, when the Transportation Task Force initially put its list together, one of its top priorities was to look at safety improvements. When the Board of County Commissioners recently adopted in April a program of $812 million for improvements to be funded with increase in property tax increment over the next 10 years. Its priorities were safety, maintenance, and capacity, but safety being first. And so we'll talk about some of the numbers, but I really think that what's important here isn't going to be the numbers, but the relationships and how these things come together, and how what you provide to us crosses a bridge at some point, and how that becomes then funded and prioritized. So having said that, what I'd like to talk about a little bit then is, as we move on, is this notion of kind of, we're really looking at transportation no longer as transportation, but looking at options of mobility. So how is it that the concepts that you come up with really turn into actual projects? And so what we have is we get input from planning. And so at the very highest level, it's the work that you're doing and the work that you're prioritizing, Vision Zero being the latest example of kind of concepts for us to incorporate. We get a lot of input from the community. We get phone calls about sidewalks. We get phone calls about resurfacing, a whole lot of things that kind of you have to get mashed into it. And then, of course, we collect data as well. And then there is the work of the School Transportation Working Group, and the work that you just heard about is really valuable. It's going to be inputted. It is new, so none of the projects, actually there are a number of projects that actually crosswalk with some of the schools that we already have. And then we have a really good relationship that we have built with school staff on really operational issues. So whether that means how do we fix Progress Village, a school that's been converted into a magnet school and now has different traffic input, and how is it that we work with Strawberry Crest, and how is it that, so for example, how is it that the school staff at the headquarters can work with us instead of principals who sometimes want to create their own traffic circulation plans, has been a really important component. We have examples of how that's worked at Strawberry Crest and other schools. And then, of course, our own county staff that provides input. And then what we do is it goes into this machination. And so I know that sometimes you put things together and you expect to see them come out. But quite frankly, we have to then test them and move them and prioritize them with funding, because there really is a $4 billion funding deficit in the county, and so we can't fund it all. So how is it that we can make the best, optimize those dollars in the best way? We look at safety, we look at design and preservation, and then again, some of the community input, we look at the practicality of alternatives. So as an example, some years ago, Waters Avenue came to us as a recommendation for a bike lane. And when we actually looked at Waters Avenue, it became very clear that Waters Avenue couldn't service that because the right-of-way was just too tight. The buildings were up against the street. So we start balancing all of that. For someone who is really anxious to see a recommendation come to fruition, and the answer is, where did that go? It got considered with a whole lot of other things because we just can't fund it all. And then, of course, what we do come up with is an implementation plan. And in this case, we have a 6-year CIP, but we also have this newly minted initiative that the board approved of $812 million. In addition to that, money for transit as well that goes into it. So a little bit of how we've been using some of the ideas that have come out. And you say sometimes, well, is that really very innovative? Is it new? Recognize we are a government organization. We're huge. We're a public works department of 600 people. And engineers typically have a way of doing things that they've done that are safe and have been blessed by DOT and all kinds of standards. So it takes us a little bit of time to make the somersault and incorporate some of these things. But we no longer look at resurfacing as just pouring asphalt on the street. We really have started looking at that as a right-of-way retrofit. So in those instances where we can, we look to see how is it that we can incorporate bike lanes, and to the extent that we have, we've incorporated bike lanes wherever we can. The other initiative that has really come from our Board of County Commissioners is how does land use and transportation really work together? And so for a long time we've talked about balancing land use and transportation and never quite understood the intricacies and the dynamics of that relationship. And that really is becoming evident now as we look at the gross macro land uses of whether it's a retail use or whether it's a office use or a residential use that abuts a collector road, or as far down as the access management, which really gets to the traffic and safety issues. As I said, we're starting to look at mobility options and not thinking about just moving cars or just moving pedestrians or bicycles. We know that we have to integrate them all together. And we have a South County mobility plan that is underway. It's kind of kicking off. But what that does is it really begins to look at something differently. We're looking at how do all those things work together? How is it that the road widening of Big Bend is going to provide alternatives for pedestrians and bicyclists? And so maybe what that is Big Bend isn't widened without a consideration of an east-west trail that connects to the north-south Suncoast Trail to bring those pieces together. We're going to look at a much more micro-level activity centers. Where are the schools? And how can children get to school without necessarily getting on a major collector? Can we start making linkages with trails? And at that micro level, we need to start. Hillsborough County is huge. It is 1,000 square miles. We have enough roads to take us from here to California up to Oregon and then back again if you stacked all our roadways together. And so it's a function of understanding this dynamic, and not every dynamic is the same. So incorporating transportation mobility improvements in Keystone is very different than looking at Brandon or the State Road 60 corridor. So understanding that has been a major cultural shift that we've been taking. But all of it really looking at mobility and safety, and of course underneath it all the school piece as well. I think we've incorporated now working with TECO LED streetlights, which will improve safety along some of our corridors. And our folks are looking at all kinds of technology and converting from orange vests to those chartreuse green vests and pavement markings and a lot of other details. I think as well, though, what is really important as we think about this is the Fletcher Avenue project that we recently implemented, $4.7 million of really pedestrian improvements. And what this does is begin to address the notion of mid-block crossings and how do pedestrians cross. Here is the challenge, though, is that you have a school. You have Muller Elementary School that's been identified on 22nd Street, which is in this vicinity. 22nd Street also has had, over the years, millions of dollars of improvements poured into it for road diets, for speed bumps, for improving safety and pedestrian, the safety and pedestrian relationship, and yet it still shows up. I drive this corridor occasionally eastbound to the USF area, and the one thing, in spite of all of the investments that we have made, $4.7 million, there are still people who avoid the mid-block crossing. We have planted cacti in the middle of the road to deter people from using something other than the mid-block crossing, and they still choose to go. It is a safety issue. If you look at who's crossing, there are mothers carrying a child in their hand with a stroller and another one in tow who are trying to cross in this major roadway. We need to understand this dynamic far better, because the improvements that we're making aren't necessarily resulting in an outcome that we need to have that are going to make this make these truly safer. And especially if Muller shows up as a school that still has safety issues, after all of the improvements we've made, we need to start reassessing what it is at those operational levels that really will result in outcomes that you all want to see. We're investing. And didn't want to talk about dollars, but I think it's important to note that your Board of County Commissioners has made a major commitment to transportation, and of the $812 million in next 10 years, $126 million is being, in the first 5 years, is being invested in safety improvements. So these are not necessarily around schools, but these are sidewalks. We have built 44 miles of sidewalks in the last 10 years. And so we are looking at everything from our land development code to look at, it doesn't make sense to build sidewalks everywhere. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we should invest in those places where really the investments are needed and really will optimize a safety situation, because sometimes we build them in the middle of nowhere and truly with no future opportunity to connect things. Sometimes they really don't make sense, and so if we have limited dollars, let's stretch them and use them in the best way possible. We continue to work with the MPO for safe routes to school, and then the school district for new schools and school retrofits. And I think on that note, you know, as we said, I think Progress Village has been a major retrofit underway. Strawberry Crest is the new Triple T school that is underway now on 672 is something that we're working with with the school board staff on to look at ways to ensure that we can mitigate those issues. But at the end of the day, what really becomes important is that here's what we're trying to do, is find a balance between the innovation and the needs and optimizing the priorities with the funding sources, because there just isn't enough to go around. We really value the input we get, and we consider that, and we think this study that's been done by the school consultant will be a very important one as we look at how we prioritize projects in the future. So we value this input. One of our challenges, I will be straight up with you, is that it becomes difficult for us to have the right level staff attend many of the meetings that the MPO has where all of these ideas are coming out. So there's a Livable Roadways Committee, there's a Bike Ped Committee, there are multiple committees. And what we have found is that when we don't allocate the right level of staff person to attend that, we miss what really comes out of it. So we have been looking at, I know Commissioner Merman's been after a transportation manager for years. We just haven't been able to get that right yet. And so we're working to ensure that we staff up appropriately and that we can make sure that the ideas that come out of here get incorporated, because we do value them. So our folks are doing what we can to take what you give us. It is going to take time, it's going to take money, and we really value what we get from the MPO and all of the committees and all of the work that you do. Any questions?
Any questions? Commissioner White, you recognize.
Thank you. Ms. Garces, can you give this board just a few specifics on what the county's been doing, particularly in conjunction with the school board, and also talk a little bit about where the funding is coming from?
Sure. I think one of the examples that was raised And I thank you, Commissioner, for that question, because one of the issues that came up beginning of last year was the elimination of the busing for high school and middle schools. And what happened is we scurried, because there is this 2-mile mile requirement for non-hazardous walking conditions. And so with the school board staff and input actually from some of our board members, we have been able to identify 4 specific schools that require immediate attention. And that is it's Farrell Middle School, it's Leonard, it's East Bay Eisenhower together on Big Bend Road, and then it's Newsom and Randall. So we looked at those, and in some cases we can begin at the Newsom and Randall and East Bay and Eisenhower. We can begin to make some physical improvements that the county will then fund. And then at the others, we have worked with school board staff to find ways to have a crossing guard, a sheriff's crossing guard at those sites. We will be bringing an item to the board to fund those, the crossing guards and those improvements in the next, probably in January or by February, to have those improvements made. So it's the school busing, courtesy busing that we've been able to address with the staff. It's some of the retrofits that have come. There is, by the way, a study that our staff has undertaken, a before and after study for 5 schools where busing was eliminated, to see what the implications are, to see what that means in terms of additional traffic generation, and then what kind of improvements might be necessary to do that. And then it's retrofits, and then it's specifically some of the new schools. But it's been a good working relationship, and we really appreciate it. And all of these pieces really do come together. Does that help, Commissioner?
Very helpful, thank you. And I'll just close by saying that, it's important to note that the MPO doesn't implement things, so it's incredibly important to hand this off to the applicable agencies, the school district, the county, the 3 municipalities. So I'm anxious to hear Mr. Farkas's presentation and hear a little bit more about how this committee might be set up.
Okay.
Move over to the school board.
Any further questions? Thank you. Before Mr. Farkas comes up, I should have asked this question earlier. It came to my mind when I saw Mr. Keller's presentation. 3 of these schools I live nearby, Middleton, Farrell, and Young. I go by them every day. And then there's Chamberlain that I go by quite often. Inevitably, they have flashing lights in school zones on Martin Luther King, where Young is, and on 22nd, where Farrell and Middleton is, and on North Boulevard, where Chamberlain is. And I can guarantee you on a daily basis, 50% of the cars that go through there don't pay any attention to those lights. So is there anything that we're doing with this group? You don't have to answer it now. When whoever can answer that, come back, to try to find out from our law enforcement, be Sheriff Department, the City of Tampa, Police Department, what are they doing to try to curtail the violators coming through those school zones? Okay?
One effort is that the state requirements are making us make them uniform throughout, so that it's very clear when you're in one, so that you can observe it. And we do have enforcement staff on our committee, and they've given us some updates. That's another thing that the enforcement that we're still addressing this particular year. They tell me they send people out to those zones first, but if there's crime or something, they tend to get pulled off. But we will continue that work, because that is something we still have yet to address in more detail.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think it's a big problem. I see it quite a bit in South Tampa. And I think the only way is to, maybe this board or the county commission board needs to send a letter to the sheriff or to the Tampa police chief and tell them to please enforce because when they start writing tickets, that's when people pay attention.
I'll second that motion to send the letter because I agree with you. The amount of complaints that
Yep.
we get about speeding, particularly in
amazing.
school zones, it's like the number one thing people are talking about constantly.
Right. So if you'd like to do that, I'll make the motion to
Made the
have
motion.
you send that letter.
Councilman Cohen seconded. Is there further discussion? Direction?
Sir.
Seeing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion is adopted. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Appreciate the opportunity to come and address and try to answer some questions as we move forward. We've had a positive relationship with the county and the staff in the county in the past 4 years that I've been in this position. But I'd say in the last 9 to 12 months, being forced, I would say, based on the non-funded transportation was a good catalyst for us to get together. The relationships changed into a more positive and more proactive approach. Had an opportunity to work with Lucia and her staff on a regular basis now and talk about some of the things that we've done. We're going to go through a couple different things that I'll give you and try to be brief because your conversation is as important as anything that I would present. We'll talk about the non-funded busted removal, and we'll talk about some of the growth that's coming and give some examples of how we've worked together to make that work. The Florida statute's very simple. There's 3 that apply to transportation in particular that have affected most of the people around this table. The first one is the duties of the school district. What's the responsibility of the parents? What's the responsibility of the school district? What's hazardous walking? And how do those two combine and fit together? So what is the state-funded busing? State-funded busing is more than 2 miles. You've heard it. I would be willing to bet before 12 months ago or 18 months ago, you probably didn't know. You never heard that 2-mile radius very often. The reason you didn't hear it in Hillsborough County is because it wasn't enforced as uniformly as it probably should have been. But that's something that we're looking for or have looked at and addressed. The state provides funding for elementary, and we say students through 6th grade. In Hillsborough County, as you all know, we're a K through 5 setup, so really the 6th grade doesn't apply. You couldn't have just 6th graders walk to a middle school. We've lumped those in together. But the state's the one that delineates, that statute delineates what K through 5 is versus 6 through 12 and what those rules are. And during the time, it's 45 cents of the dollars what we get refunded or reimbursed from the state for funding on transportation. This year, I think it's going to be closer to about 42 cents on the dollar, and the rest of that comes out of Part 1. Part 1 is the money for classrooms, teachers, the supplies that go directly towards our students. So,
I think we should, for the record, just say that it's appalling. That it's shameful and appalling that this is the situation in our
It's just
state.
unbelievable.
it would make my life a lot easier if it was not the situation.
I mean, Commissioner Merman, we were there. How much?
I know.
It was worse than that at one time.
I agree, but it's still bad.
We
Yes.
fund our prisons better.
Yes.
That-
Well, they're not too good.
Very much so. And that,
better not
and Commissioner Millen, the relationship between that should be correlated. When we don't fund education, how that ends in the prisons, to your point. So I would agree. My background is the Department of Juvenile Justice before I got into education. So that is, there's a direct correlation. So what is the non-funded busing? It's pretty simple. It's everyone that lives in that 2 miles that doesn't meet the hazardous walking conditions that we have there. The state's the one I said is that identifies middle school and high school students and hazardous walking. And those funds, as I said, come directly from the classroom. I want to point out that the optics are a big part of this. What's on statute and what considers safe walking versus what a parent looks at that lens through are not always the same thing. Many around you have students in the public school system. The statute doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to feel safe as a parent to put them on that road. The statute is very clear, though, on who the responsibility lies on. And we as the government agencies that support the schools need to make sure that we're all on the same page about how we want to support that process. So high school, middle school, non-funded. The 17-18 school year, we moved about 7,500 kids. Again, we've got 218,000 kids that are in the school district, but 7,500 high school, middle school students were removed in that 2-mile radius. That's 79 schools that it affected. We still have about 1,000 kids that are still in that middle and high school that meet hazardous walking conditions. Wharton High School they're there when you're based on the construction that's there right now. Then you've got a Gaither High School. It's got a 6-lane that that's never gonna meet that criteria, and they'll continue to have busing. But from the press, you'd think it'd be a lot more than that based on the number of kids we have. But it is definitely a large group and that were affected by this change. So elementary. We have 12,000 elementary kids that meet this criteria. There's been official stance from our superintendent and school board that have said that we won't even address this issue for at least another year. So it will not be for this coming fall that we even touch it. But that is, you can look at the cost of that, which is right below it. 406 is what we get reimbursed per student on base allocation. That's $5 million, and that's an annual cost avoidance every single year that we'll have that. So it is a large ticket item for elementary coming up. So what is the new law, the 188, what would that change? The reduction of walking from 2 miles to 1.5 miles. The removal of the language of elementary, which means it apply K through 12, not just K through 6. And then the reduction from 6-lane uncontrolled crossing to 4-lane uncontrolled. The key word in that sentence is uncontrolled. If there's a stoplight, it's controlled, so it doesn't meet some of that stuff. So Big Bend Road's a perfect example. There's a stoplight there, it's a controlled intersection, doesn't fit in that same area. So what's the largest impact to Hillsborough County Schools? There's 19,000 kids that live between 1.5 and 2 miles that would fit into that criteria. So that is a large, that 20,000 kids we just talked about that were 2 miles that were in, 19,000 are between 1.5 and 2 miles at K through 12.
That's incredible.
What's the cost of that? Very simple. You've got 150 buses minimum on that. Capital cost of the buses is $16.5 million, and then operating costs 6.75. And in our case, trying to find another 150 to 200 school bus drivers to do that is also a challenge for us too. So we need a parking place for those. We need other mechanics to work on those. There's the challenges that are there are there.
Is that just the new costs, or is that overall costs?
That is just the new cost is the
Incremental.
16.5 the capital, and then you're going to see 6.75 a year at a minimum.
No, I just meant the new cost for implementing the 2 to 1.5.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
all.
That's just that.
Okay, yeah.
Just that change. Just that half mile is an expensive half mile. The next part's long-range planning, but I'd like to address some of the hazardous walking first, unless you want me to put those together and then address them both together. I'll take your direction on that. Because they kind of correlate. We attend Oliver come in and do a study and talk about growth and the way we have it. You all deal with it in your positions. The concern I had as coming in new to the position was we had a growth rate for if we have this many new houses, this is how many kids it equals. Well, if you look downtown at the new townhomes that are there versus Fishhawk, there's a different generation right there. I mean, you can see just common sense would tell you that there's a lot more kids that are going to generate in Fishhawk compared to a new tower down here that has 400 units and we get 40 kids from it. If there's 400 houses in Fishhawk, we're getting a lot more than 40 kids. And so we need to be more specific in the way we did generation rates. Tyndall Oliver came in and the county and the school board commissioned a study to look at that and look at what do we need to do. So growth management is pretty simple. The second one, student generation rates, is what I was just talking about. And where do we need to plan and develop? They came up with using a lot of different funding sources, a 1.3 annual growth rate. That's about 10,000 residential permits per year that we'll have in that. Majority of it's in the South County. You guys all know that. You live it every single day. But that's 5,400 new students to the district every single year. We also impacted and talked about the charter schools that are here and took out which kids were going to charter schools, tried to plan that in. We didn't want to overestimate how many new student stations we'd need. And then we looked at minimum versus probable. I mean, in an optimal world, we'd like to build this many schools, but if we have to and money's tight, what do we need to do? So we looked at a few different areas that you're going to see, and then looked at portables, things that we've tried to get away from in schools, and if we have to do it, what are we going to do and how do we do that? So we talked about the maintenance backlog and some of the debt that goes along with it. So this is the minimum scenario, and I want to give you a reference point because it's important to understand the context of what this study is. So when you look at the minimum number of schools I'm going to give you in a couple of minutes, that would assume that schools are at 200% capacity, which we've never done in Hillsborough County before. The largest we've been is about 120%. Leonard High School is bursting at the seams. Gorey Elementary School is bursting. They're at about 115%. So that's probably not even a realistic number, but that's what the study the vendor did to kind of give us an idea. Heavy portable usage, any place we can put portables, frequent redistricting, new boundary lines, and then talk about what are other more co-teaching in every single classroom, things like that aren't real optimal for education but are possibilities. The probable scenario is 150% capacity. Again, something we haven't been at. We haven't been at a school double sessions in almost 20 years to do anything like that. So it's again, using portables, things like that. So the background of what they're trying to do is giving you context for what does it mean to using all other options before you build a school. The other thing that was important for this growth study was we know what happened in the downturn economy. And you see that they took that snippet out of when things went crazy and kind of took that out of the mix so it wouldn't skew our results and make sure that it looked like that Florida is back to its normal growth rate. And so they took that snippet out to make sure that it didn't affect what we did. This is the county permitting and how many units we have per year, and you can see where we're headed back for this part of the generation rate. So what does that mean? From 2018 to 2032, minimum, that's the 200% capacity one we've never done before, 23 new schools that are going to be there. 20 in the south, 3 in the northeast. That's the Plant City growth. And then the probable is 38 that we'll have there. That is an average of 1.5 per year for minimum, 2.5. That is unique. I will tell you, we've gone through huge turns in the late 1990s, early 2000s. We were building 10 schools a year, and then we went to 0 for the last 3 years. Now we've had 1 school the last couple of years that have gone. So it's been a roller coaster of how we've built. This is the key point. We talked about the funding, and we've got 2.5 in maintenance needs, $1 billion. We have $1 billion in debt when the impact fee was much lower, and we were still had to build schools. So then we talked about what the revenue is for coming in, and we're still $1.2 billion in debt when you look at the long range of what it's going to look like. So you talk, why is it a bigger issue in Hillsborough County? Well, we just gave a map for a reference point of who went out for more tax, who went out for a community investment tax, and this is the full, not 1/8 of a penny that we have for our current CIT, but for a penny or half penny that went out there, and who went out for a capital outlay tax. Orange County went out there, got a penny tax on theirs. 53% of their entire operating budget, new construction, maintenance guys, all that is funded from their penny tax in Orange County. So that's a big portion of how they get it. Why you don't hear that, and you hear in Orange County when they're building new schools or are doing it. There's a long range, a lot of details. So if you're into the planning part of it or have that, I'd like to follow up and have those. But I tried to give you just a 30,000-foot view because I knew the questions would come. But it is it's great to have that information. It's also a little bit scary to have that information as we go forward. We look forward to a steep growth curve. And one quick point, and then I'll turn over to questions. We talked about South County, and Ms. Garcia referenced high school TTT. We haven't built a high school in about 12 to 14 years. Well, it's no good place to put a high school. No one wants 2,500 kids going every single day. So when we first talked to county staff, it was, well, you can't put it there, and you can't put it there. And we're getting calls and things like that. And I said, you're exactly right. It's there. So what's the call going to be when we say, we can't enroll your student at Leonard? And we can't enroll your student at East Bay because it's there too. And Riverview is also at capacity. So you live in Waimama, but we're going to have to send you to Spoto. That's what we'd have to do. Those calls will be much more intense. So it's easy to say why we don't need a high school. Instead, let's work together and figure out where's the best place or the lesser of the evils of where we can put one that we can work together and have it. And that conversation has been very fruitful because it helps us understand some of the challenges that come with what they're doing and what we're doing. And the conversations we've had have been very productive, and we feel like we found a happy medium for the next location. But that was one high school that we've talked about with Mr. Garcia. As I just told you, we're probably going to need about 25 more in the next 15 years. So that relationship has to be positive and has to be one that can serve both needs. But I'll be happy to answer questions. I know there's a lot, so I'll be happy to try to answer as much as I can.
Mr. Chairman, the slide that showed 23 schools, that was based on 200% capacity.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, that's not an option. 150 is not an option. What's the number at 150?
125 is probably a realistic one, and that's if we don't go on double session. It's about 35 schools that'll go there. It also includes us doing rebounding and making sure that all our magnet schools are 100% capacity. There's a couple other factors that aren't listed in the study that we as a school district have already started to plan for, knowing that that's going to come.
And that's till 2032 as well?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we're looking at about 30 schools as realistic. Now, again, growth patterns, will Plant City, the northern part, develop as quickly as it can? Things like that are harder for us to plan for, but that will kind of dictate it. But I think 30 schools is a realistic number to look at.
How many new students did you say we had last year here?
4,000 was right. We're at between 4,000 and 5,000 what we've had traditionally each year.
So that's what you're projecting each year?
5,400 is what they're saying from 18 to 32 they're projecting, yes.
I don't know if you can answer this question, or maybe Ms. Stewart could answer this question. Have you all been planning and looking at, in case the additional $25,000 homestead exemption passes, what's going to happen to you?
It will. It's actually, the school levy is not part of the actual homestead, so that won't affect us the way it affects the other government agencies.
It will affect you some, though.
Yes, a little bit, but not quite the heart attack I had when I first heard the figure. It still is alarming, but not quite as much as it'll impact the county staff for what we have. It'll take that other 25,000 will not affect from the laws and the reading I have in our legal. But yes, sir.
Any further questions? Yes, Mr. White.
So, have you started to think about what the makeup of that committee might look like as it moves over to the school district?
Great question. And Dr. White, a big part of what we had is making sure the right people are at the table. The school transportation work group is a great group, and there's a lot of knowledge of that group, but it fills the room. And I've found, in my experience, that it's a lot easier to work with having the key players at the table. So from the district staff, it's very simple. We've realigned and reorganized so that our district safety, our district maintenance and construction, and our group from transportation are all under the same umbrella. They're all in the same division, so they'll be working together. But then we envision looking at the particular schools. Our first official meeting is going to be Wednesday, tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. Hunters Green's our first pilot. And the reason Hunters Green came up is because we did a boundary adjustment there. And we know there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be walking or taking a car to school. So that's a great opportunity for us to have it. So we'll have an internal conversation the first time. We won't have any of the external. But in that case, when that becomes the official case, this is our test case, we'd have the county staff there because they'll be affected by that. We'll also have the sheriff's department there because that's going to be a big part of what we do as well. And then someone from the county staff, either from MPO, Ms. Silva, or somebody else that represents there. But trying to find that balance between having too many people there versus having the right people at the table. But I'll be happy to hear if any suggestions on who we have at that table to make sure we got the right people.
Well, I think the Tampa City councilman and the two mayors that are here would probably agree that the municipalities should have some representation in some way, shape, or form.
And and I agree. And we'd have it if the schools. We'd like to take on, have that agenda set up so we've got the 3 schools that are there. They can submit whoever they want, and we'll talk about any schools that we need to. But we have a targeted group that's there. So there's a Temple Terrace school, and Dr. Mel needs to come and address that. Then she'd have the opportunity to send her staff of who she thinks would be appropriate to visit that school. But she wouldn't have to come unless she wanted to, come and listen to a conversation about Hunters Green that may not affect her area or municipality. So I'd like to target that, and then we can have the group that's there that affects them. But that's our goal.
Right, so there would be some fluidity.
Yes, yes, sir.
When schools in Plant City or Temple Terrace or within the Tampa city limits are involved, you would engage the municipalities on an as-needed basis.
Correct, and I'd like to give them that information ahead of time so that we can give them the map ahead of time. And it's not just a conversation that no one has background for. So they could do their homework and they could talk to their people, where have we gotten complaints from, what are the issues that have come forward, talk to other people that are either on their county staff or on their city staff, so that you've got some information to come to the table with. And then in turn from the district standpoint, we'll have our options together. My sites utility staff will go out there and say, hey, is it a possibility to change the turn lanes or to flip the car loop and the bus rider loop, so that we can come to the table and have some answers instead of having a conversation, at least try to find some solutions.
Got it. And when I first brought this issue up, obviously safety is incredibly important. I mean, there's not a thing out there that trumps the safety of our kids. But I would also like for the group to be mindful of just the logistical issues that we have around our schools. You drive by schools and you see people parked on medians and all up and down rights of way and everything else. And, obviously there are a lot of issues there from queuing on the campus, centralized control. I'm not trying to tattletale here, but I know Strawberry Crest was mentioned as an example. I think they've scrapped the plan that was developed last year.
Yep.
And that's evident when you try to maneuver through the intersection of Gallagher and 92. That's unfortunate that decision's been made. I don't know who made that decision, but you can sure see it on 92. And I just want school district staff and school level staff to just understand that once those cars stack up to their campus boundary and then begin to spill out onto arterial roads and collector roads, that's a major issue from a safety perspective, from a commerce perspective, and the list goes on and on and on. So, I'd really like to take a serious look at these things and be serious about it. With Strawberry Crest as an example, here you have presumably the principal, but maybe not. Maybe it was district staff that's just fallen back into that same comfortable habit. Unfortunately, it's not very comfortable for the people that are trying to traverse U.S. Highway 92, which is a pretty major arterial road that connects people over long distances.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I think that having one group where there's not I can call the safety officer, I can call someone else, or I can call the county, because the goal of the group would be that Dr. White, when you get a complaint, you know exactly where to send it. It's not going to be to an administrator or to that particular principal. Sometimes they have that problem of stepping back and looking at the larger picture. And it definitely wasn't made from a district staff level. Awareness of it is a big part of it. But we'd like for one place to catch all that stuff. And therefore, when it's done, administration will be part of that team, that the decision's made, and that if that decision's made in isolation or a principal decides they want to go against it, then their supervisor has direct quotes. So you don't have that authority to do that. The lack of that central location, the lack of it being placed out depending on what municipality you're in, is honestly one of our biggest challenges. It's like our fence committee, for those that have it. We have all the law enforcement, all the people that are at one table, and decisions get made very quickly. Once we got the way of work going, it happened very quickly. That doesn't happen for circulation. The Hunters Green example is a perfect one where it's not going to go onto Cross Creek. It's probably going to go back into Hunters Green, the neighborhood, which means the homeowners association would be invited to be part of that conversation. But I honestly think when it's a school district standpoint, there wasn't one place they could go to get all the answers. This is going to be one place. So I'm guarantee you board members will send information to us. But the idea being, this isn't a questionable or an area or a gray area. This is the way we're going to do the traffic pattern. And safety's telling you that, law enforcement telling you that, and your administration, the district office is going to tell you that too. But it's the lack of a confirmed deal. Here's what it is. And you don't have the ability to change that without going through this committee. That provides lack of exposure for our board and provides some safety and security from all the municipalities that we deal with too. So I think that kind of having a one-stop shop, for lack of a better word, is going to help all of us around the table.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I felt like you gave almost two presentations, and I don't want to forget the first one you gave, because the first one was about the kind of safety and current conditions, and the second one was about the future. And honestly, at this point, I can't really wrap my head around the future, so I'm going to put that aside for now. But I want to go back to the first part, and this is the final presentation we're going to have on the school. Okay. So, and I didn't want to ask questions before because I wanted us to be able to get through this. We got a lot of information this morning, but I think it's, first of all, what I'm hearing, I guess, and it sounds really good and important, was that we're having more coordination and more attention and focus on this than we've ever had before, and coordinating in a way that, and maybe needing to pull in the cities, municipalities, but that we're coordinating and looking at all these issues in a way that we've never had. It's been siloed before. That's
correct. Instead of it just being a paperwork checkbox of, yeah, we went and did this, actually sitting down with the staff and having those conversations with people that do that every day. I mean, the conversation that we've had with Lucia and her staff is not the formal paperwork. It's the, all right, if we do this, this is going to be the impact of it, and having a conversation. That's been the biggest part, and we will exactly do that. Wherever we cite a school now, the growth in a majority of the schools we're talking about will be in the southern part of the county and will involve her staff. But when we showed the study to her staff and talked about the schools and said, imagine where you're going to drop 15 or 20 schools in the southern part of the county, and then look at Big Bend and some of the roads that are there, and the size of those is going to be a little bit scary. But yes, ma'am, to answer your question, it is most assuredly a different kind of conversation we've had about that too. And there's a history, there's a reason why that Cameron and some of the other people can tell you about who's paying for what and what can happen on site and off site. That's history. Luckily, I wasn't there during that time, so I could take the neutral approach of the history is history, and what do we do going forward that we can do to solve it? Because to Dr. White's point, when it spills out in the road, they call him and then they call us. So they call both of them. They don't just make the one phone call. So we'd like to be the good partner rather than the recipient of the complaints.
Well, I think this is really excellent that this is moving forward and gives us a basis for really looking at this. I find so many times when I ask a question, it involves like 6 different, just like I asked earlier about, just bus stops, and how complex, and how we're talking about planning and development and hard, and then a municipality or what. And so, and what I find about transit and transportation is it's the same thing. There is no silver bullet. People think, oh, well, if we just had, I don't know, whatever, light rail on the expressway for, billions of dollars, that somehow we're going to fix our transportation issues. And it's always, to me, a million different smaller things that deal with things and that we have to think about. And to me, this is one of them. The school system, I was surprised to learn that, that is our biggest transportation system here in Hillsborough, transit system in Hillsborough County. Hart has about 190 buses. The schools have about 700. And this is not counting.
1,000 every day.
1,000?
1,200 buses. We do 1,000
I'm so
routes
wrong.
every single day.
Wow. Okay, I had heard 700.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I just realized.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, it's just amazing numbers. And then when I hear about these 19,000 students that are just between the 2 mile and the 1.5 mile range, which I think astonishing, and we had said before, appalling and shameful, that the state law is only dealing with kids under 2 miles, because I don't, or not including kids under 2 miles, and we're talking about shifting it to 1.5. That's all it is, that half
That's
mile.
this proposed bill.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that, but it's frankly not enough. I mean, and I think that this, when we look at this, and I know Commissioner White, you've raised this before, it is a big transportation issue too. When we talk about transportation on our roads, we're talking about not our roads all the time. We're really talking about our roads at certain times, and those are at our peak hours. And our peak hours are hugely controlled, not just by our commute, which is what we usually think about to work, but people getting kids to schools, and our transportation needs in getting kids to schools. I don't know. I think I've heard before that at peak rush, even at peak hours, or maybe it's overall, that about 20% of our road traffic is for commuting to work, to and from work. I wonder what the school numbers would be, because I think it would be greatly, I was really interested to hear about the school's times changing. I knew that it happened, but I hadn't thought about it quite in terms of how it impact our traffic patterns and how that would look prospectively on that. So I thought about more about the internal schedules at the schools, and I've heard for years that high schoolers should be starting later, and just a matter of that they perform better. And
When the high school started, they want to start later and get out earlier. I mean,
Right.
That's their pretty consistent,
yeah,
pretty
right.
consistent message, because they've got jobs they got to get to, but I can't start
11
before
to
9
2,
o'clock.
right?
Yeah, 11 to 1-ish with lunch included. That's usually that's what my high schoolers want. Sure.
But I was so I'm glad that we're finally raising, and I think we should be a big, loud voice here in Tampa Bay on with our state legislature on funding and moving to move kids between the 2 mile and 1.5 mile, so that we can take some of our traffic off the roads. I mean, we have got to deal with this and be using our transit opportunities as much as we can. It's affecting everything we do.
Well, I think that Fishhawk is an example of that. Fishhawk, going to drop my kids off for the previous 10 years was a pain to drop them off. It was a long line. There's a ton of kids in the line there. But the courtesy busing being eliminated just made it a little bit worse of that part of a problem that was already a bad situation makes it worse. So the opportunity to put 50 or 60 kids on a bus opposed to 1 kid in a car is a big part of what we do. We've also, the MPO has been great in the school transportation work group of having some of our other vendors and have our other partners look at, and organize we can't arrange car riding in there from the liability standpoint, but we have there's websites, technology can be our friend of who's coming from that area and leaving at the same time, and can help arrange some of that stuff too, because a lot of it is, I don't want to put my kid on a bus, or timing, they've got practice before or after school. So having technology be our friend and do a little bit more of the commuting together is probably another thing that's going to help us as well.
I also think about the deaths that we've had in this county, particularly about, I think, some of the ones that sear in my memory are really students, like the student that was killed at Chamberlain High School a few years ago, the students that were crossing the road at Hillsborough or Martin Luther King for Middleton. And, we've heard some about that, but as I understand it, so there's only 2 exceptions that the state that qualify under state for school hazardous walking conditions in Hillsborough County. All the hazards we have, the second highest fatality rate in the nation, and we only have 2 places that qualify under the state's definition of.
I was given 2 examples. There's 1,000 kids in a bunch of different places that have exceptions of that. I'm sorry, I was just giving 2 references, so you give a.
Oh, I keep hearing that there were just 2 places.
No, ma'am, and I can get a list of what they are. There's 1,000
Okay, because I wanted
kids.
to know what they were, because
Well,
I've been asking.
It's a 6-lane road is a big part of it. So when you talk about Dale Mabry up by Gaither, that's one that they're not allowed to cross a 6-lane road. That's part of the law, was to change that to a 4-lane road with a signal. So.
Got it. I'm trying to absorb all this because I'm.
But it's a flat path. It's not a sidewalk, and that's
Right.
a hard thing for a parent to grab onto a lot of times for that safe walking condition.
Right.
That's on there too, but it is a stretch to get to that part of it too.
Right.
You're right.
Okay. I just wanted to, I think this is just really important as we move forward, and to keep emphasizing this, because I think it's a huge a segment, just like every other thing is a segment of what we need to do to move both our transportation and transit systems and, really do what we should be doing here in the county to move people and get them to work in places on time. So.
And Hart, a reference point for you guys, I know you're exposed to Hart a bunch, is Hart has about 25,000 rides on a given day, which 30,000 depending if it's someone from Hart, and please correct me. We have 90.
More, yeah, 45.
45.
Right.
So we have 98,000 each way. So we got 190,000 basically kids that are riding trips each day that are on school buses, not including field trip, athletic events, things.
98,000 each way?
Yes. And then the athletic and field trips every night too. So it's a bunch.
Mr. Fox, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming for that presentation. One other question? I'm sorry, Ms. Stewart.
No, I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to thank the MPO board for allowing this working group to continue the work for one more year. The ultimate goal when we first got together was to try and put this within the school district so that they can manage and be very detailed in the work. We are not at that level yet, so Ms. Silva has been fantastic in the work that she has done for this group. And then I too wanted to thank all of the municipalities who are at the table. They come regularly to hear sometimes presentations that don't really fit into their wheelhouse, but they're still there. They have provided enormous amount of data, and the data has been overwhelming that we have put together to move forward. It's really a data-driven group, so looking at crashes and pedestrian issues and bicycle issues to kind of take the data and use the resources that we do have to move with the data. Certainly don't want to misuse information or misuse funding. So let's use the funding we have at the most critical places. And that's really kind of been our focus. So I want to thank the municipalities who sit at the table and then the presenters who came today and offered their expertise. We will continue the work for the next year. And then like Mr. Farkas said, we have already started putting together this group at the school district level, which will be a very intentional and school by school more basis, which is not where I wouldn't want to take on that work at the school transportation working group, but we'll definitely stay connected to the work that's going on. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Executive Director's report.
Thank you, sir. And board members, I want to thank you for the time that you have spent with the MPO board this year and with all of the committees and advisory groups of the MPO that a number of you step up to put in time with. This is a process of working on issues collaboratively, and I think we have rolled the boulder up the hill at least a foot or two this year, and thank you for all of that. In particular, I wanted to thank Councilman Cohen, Commissioner Kemp, and Commissioner Merman for a long but productive regional meeting last Friday of the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee with the Tampa Bay TMA Leadership Group. Our regional planning process is in a state of flux, and Ms. Zink was there as well. And so the process of coming up with priorities is a messy one right now, and the role of TBARTA continues to evolve. So it was valuable for us all to get together and make sure that we are as closely in alignment as we can be as we move forward and continue to make changes in how we speak with one voice. And with that, our first meeting in January is going to be Wednesday, January the 3rd. It is not going to be on the 26th floor as it says in your agenda packet. It is going to be on the second floor. Wanda was just able to get the confirmation from county facilities about that location. We will be sending out calendar appointments to all of the board members that will have the meeting locations for you.
Okay, is there any old business we need to discuss? Mayor Roach.
Commissioner,
And fellow board members, I was advised that it would be important to be on the record with this comment, so a brief comment for the record. My first meeting as a member of the MPO was the November meeting, and I was oriented ahead of that meeting and briefed on an initiative that I immediately voiced concern over. I was told it was for discussion and nothing would go forward without the city of Temple Terrace, the most impacted entity, being briefed. So the night after my swearing-in ceremony, November 8th, I came to the MPO meeting, and FDOT presented highlighting that very initiative. Elevated lanes are an aerial extension over Fowler Avenue. Subsequently, another entity was highlighted around a design contest, and another the study, and then the Times article came out last week. So our phones and emails in Temple Terrace have been very busy because our council has not been briefed. They are not happy. Our citizens have not been involved, and they are flat out angry. This is an initiative that would divide the city of Temple Terrace in half. It would devastate the businesses on the Fowler Avenue and 56th corridor. It would decimate property values as you are putting an aerial over residential areas and creating an eyesore. And although there seems to have been many who have been engaged in this discussion, Temple Terrace has not been brought into the discussion. And since MPO staff have told me they are the ones who came up with the idea, I am asking this board to please cease. It is something that would devastate the community I represent. I had one staffer say Temple Terrace should have thought about that before they located so close to USF. I want to believe that staff member is just uninformed that Temple Terrace was incorporated in 1925, and it was 3+ decades later that USF came into the fold.
1956.
We appreciate USF, but we were there first, so we can't pick up and move our city for the communities of USF. And that's my statement. Thank you.
You want to address that?
Sure. So,
Oh, you under the bus.
no, that's fine. And I did talk with Mayor Girardo about this idea, which is honestly a very, very preliminary idea. From what I understand, as we're talking with the department about Tampa Bay Next and where express lanes might go. The other MPOs are looking at the possibility of doing structures like what's going to be built on Gandy Boulevard in other parts of the region. And so we had preliminary conversations with Department of Transportation representatives about, is that something that would be worth looking at on Fowler Avenue? Perhaps it would be beneficial for the adjacent communities if it could be in conjunction with a road diet or, a more livable ground level roadway while taking some of the through traffic and putting it up in the air. So honestly, this was a very preliminary conversation. When I went to brief Mayor Girardo, I let her know that this conversation had occurred. I asked for her feedback. I asked for the feedback of her constituents through her. Again, this is, to my knowledge, this is a very preliminary exploratory conversation, not even at the point of a feasibility study.
May I ask a question? We've never, as a board, endorsed this concept before. I mean, this has never come up here. I don't think I'd ever heard about it.
We've heard about it. That's the first time I've heard.
Yeah.
Well, and again, for me, I was told it was an idea, and so imagine my surprise at my first meeting that FDOT is presenting. I have since had meetings with FDOT. I've been told by our partner at the Alliance, people are quoted in the Times article as being gung-ho about it, and I just wanted my municipality, my city put on record. We are very opposed. And if you need the citizens or the businesses to come and present to this board, or if Ms. Alden would like me to forward those messages on to you. But we have been very busy since the Times article came out. And it will be addressed, I'm sure, at tonight's city council meeting. I'm sure we're going to have citizens there to talk about it. So it may not have risen to the level here, but in the Times article, when it said, we need to have easy access to a stadium at USF, my citizens did not look favorably at that.
I think that's the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a citizen of Temple Terrace and a frequent user of Fowler Avenue and representing Temple Terrace on the Planning Commission, that's the first time I heard about that idea. Also, when I saw it in the news article, I'm very surprised. In fact, I'm just taken aback by this, by that notion to be out in the public as far as it has gone, without, again, a lot of people actually knowing about it or coming up, and even before this board.
Well, first and foremost, that Councilman Cohen said, and others, we never heard it. I never heard anything about it. That's first and foremost. It's in the newspapers. Did they mention MPO in the newspapers at all?
No.
Well, I think one of the things that you all need to do in Temple Terrace, and the officers are very near your borders, go talk to FDOT, because obviously they're the ones that sprung this on you with the newspapers, and this board had no idea about this. This is the first time I've ever heard about it this morning. And if you have some concerns, definitely need to take that to FDOT. I'm a graduate of USF, but Temple Terrace is there first. I'm glad we're getting a stadium, but Temple Terrace is there first. So I think that's what you need to do.
And thank you, Chairman, for that. And I have met with FDOT, but again, FDOT shared with this board that concept November 8th. I think I was stunned, as it was my first meeting, but I immediately beat a path off the dais to set up a meeting with FDOT, because they kind of said, and everyone's coming along with it. And so I have had a subsequent meeting with FDOT. I have had subsequent conversations with the Alliance, and I just wanted to be on the record today stating our fierce opposition.
Mr. White, you recognize.
Thank you. Ms. Alden, I don't recall, I mean, was that mentioned even in passing on November 8th by FDOT?
Only very generically, as elevated lanes, something that they're exploring. That's something that they've been saying that they're looking at in Tampa Bay Next. As you know, they've been taking a very, sort of big picture approach to how to look at our traffic challenges.
Would you have the ability to get FDOT representatives here to present on just that concept to this board? Is that something you could facilitate?
Just for clarification, on elevated in general or on Fowler Avenue in
On
particular?
this exact Fowler Avenue
Fowler.
concept. Is that something you could facilitate?
Of course.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to direct staff to schedule a presentation by FDOT that focuses on that Temple Terrace project.
There's a motion by Commissioner White, second by Councilman Maniscalco, to have, you want a specific date?
Can we do it February? Is that possible? Or I know we're going to be at the mercy at FDOT to some degree, but
Just
how about
to
at a
suggest
minimum?
Having
February.
directed this presentation at our February meeting. Any further discussion? Let's do it.
I'll wait till after my
Okay,
my
any further
comments.
discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. Ms. Stewart.
Thank you for the motion, Dr. White, and Ms. Dr. Hirado for bringing this forward, because when I heard about this after the fact, I was actually pretty stunned. And I think that we have to be cautious as to when FDOT does present to us, that anything that's coming that's a new idea or hasn't been presented to before should be in big red highlight. I mean, this is how we got in trouble before. This is how we came to this very tumultuous relationship with FDOT over the last year, and that's changed dramatically. So I'm very surprised at them presenting something like that and not having it be highlighted, oh, hey, by the way, we're talking about this, so that everyone was aware. And for only one or two board members to even notice that that came up there, we were not anticipating that, and that's our bad. We should have seen that, but we should have been alerted that that was a conversation, and I'm disappointed that they didn't bring that forward. So I appreciate your motion, and I look forward to them coming and explaining themselves.
Councilman Cohen, you recognize.
Yeah, and normally our process is that we vet things in the policy committee before they come to the full board. So, it is really outside of the normal way of doing things for something to get this far without any any buy-in from any of the members here. Believe me, we've spent hours talking about the widening of one particular segment of Lithia Pinecrest. So
Years.
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 So these things don't just fly through without any scrutiny.
I appreciate that, and I will share, it's been a very, I think Ms. Alden will agree, it's been a very tumultuous month in communication between the two of us, and I shared with her, the board I was most excited about serving on has been a migraine creator for me. And I have walked in with somewhat of a jaded attitude about the level of communication and coordination. So thank you, Commissioner White.
Mr. Kemp, short. Time's of essence.
I just wanted to also thank you for bringing that up, and I was the same way, just where do we have this? But I also would like FDOT to bring forward a Bush Boulevard corridor. They're doing a study of that, and I'd like to see that here, and it's not been presented to us. So at the same time, I'd like to ask them to do that.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Councilman Cohen and Maniscalco, to have FDOT bring forth the
A Bush
Bush Boulevard
Boulevard,
study on a particular, you want a particular time?
whenever. just-
Whenever?
Yeah.
All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion adopted. Anything else? Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. We adjourn.
About 30 days before we went to trial, she went and had another DUI.
From my experience, most drivers don't know. They get angry with cyclists. They don't think that they have a right to be in the road. They think they should be on the sidewalk. They don't realize that a cyclist is going 25, 30 miles an hour, and that's not safe on the sidewalk. Being a bike messenger at the time, that's how I made my living, as a cyclist. And I was on a delivery for my employer at the time. I was waiting for the light to change, and I'm looking down the street.